Hi, I'm Jenny Morrow, an 18-year marriage therapist and a 20-year life coach and relationship coach. And on this channel, we're talking all things self-improvement and relationship improvement from a variety of different methods, models, books, and angles. So welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest questions I have gotten over the last 20 years in my work with clients. We're also going to be talking about a word that correlates with one of the biggest struggles people navigate in their relationship life. Ambivalence. Today we'll talk about what is ambivalence. We'll talk about different types of ambivalence. We'll talk about a method that you can use to apply to relationship ambivalence specifically when you're wondering whether you stay or whether you leave. We will also talk about a few of my favorite questions that you can ask yourself to make a confident decision and finally feel like you can move forward. What is ambivalence? Ambivalence is a sign that you haven't found the information or the evidence that really works for you to make a decision that you can feel comfortable about. Ambivalence is not necessarily an indicator about what's true out there. For example, someone could make a great partner and you might still feel ambivalent about being with them. A lot of times the ways that we approach ambivalence is through either a passive or aggressive response. That means either we try to stuff the ambivalence down and not feel it, not experience it, not acknowledge it, or on the flip side, we try to fix the ambivalence by solving the problem as quickly as we can. The problem with both of these approaches is that they actually suggest that ambivalence is a problem. My personal perspective is that ambivalence is not a problem. Ambivalence is an experience. And the most effective approach to ambivalence is to learn how to work with ambivalence moment to moment in a way that allows you to stay centered and present. There are a few different types of ambivalence. One type of ambivalence relates to how much you actually care about something. So for example, is your ambivalence there because of your own personal desires and what's not aligning with your truth? Or is your ambivalence there because of what other people have told you about what is true about life and what is going to make you happy? Another type of ambivalence is whether you are ambivalent about something that currently exists and whether or not you want to keep that thing going, or whether or not you are ambivalent about a dream or an imagination of something that could exist one day, and whether or not you want to keep attempting to create that outcome or that experience. And a third area of ambivalence is specifically what you're ambivalent about. So a lot of times as a marriage therapist and a relationship coach, a lot of people will come in wondering, do I stay in my relationship or not? But there's many things we can be ambivalent about in life. For example, I personally have dealt with ambivalence around, do I have a child or not have a child, especially under certain circumstances that I was dealing with in my life. Another area of ambivalence I've had to work through is, do I stay in the religion that I was born and raised in, or do I leave this religion for certain reasons? So I will talk a little bit about my personal experiences today and how they can relate to what you might be experiencing if you're experiencing ambivalence in your own relationship today. If you yourself are not experiencing ambivalence about your current relationship, but you are experiencing ambivalence about something important, hopefully this will also help you sort things out. So as we go through this, bring to mind one thing in your life you currently feel ambivalent about. You currently wonder, do I fully invest my energy, my time, my attention into this thing or this person or this particular outcome? Or do I put my time, energy, attention, care, heart, mind somewhere else? So today I want to talk about a method that I have often suggested to people over the years. And that comes from a book by a woman named Mira Kirschenbaum. The book is called Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay. And you can see this is an old copy. This is actually one of the books I've had for the longest in my library. So I've had this book probably at least 15 years, if not more. And I bought it, I believe, on Amazon. I'm guessing you can still get a copy. So I will add the link to the description below if you want to get a copy. This book includes 36 questions that you can use to help yourself get the right kind of evidence and information that can help you answer your question more clearly. Do I stay or do I go? In the book, she talks more about ambivalence. She then goes through each of the 36 questions. She outlines the question itself. She details some examples, some stories, and then she gives a guideline for how to approach the question. One of the things I really like about this book is that she does acknowledge that some people are happier when they leave their relationships and some people are happier when they stay. I think this is a really important piece to understand because sometimes we are so committed to a certain idea or person or way of being that we have a hard time seeing through the fog and understanding that it really can be in our best interest at times to stay true and stay committed to something, and it really can be in our best interest at times to let something go. Which is really hard for someone like me to say because I tend to want to be so committed to certain things or certain people or certain ways of viewing the world. And again, that can be both a pro and a con. The key is to be able to dive deep, stay true to ambivalence if it's actually there, until you can suss things out enough to make a decision that feels true for you. So the reality is that when you stay in ambivalence, you spend a period of time in an unknown spot, and someone else or something else about life might make a decision for you. A lot of times people will say, not making a decision is a decision. And that is true. Staying in ambivalence is a decision. It's not always one we feel like we have power over. So it's important to acknowledge the truth. If you feel like you have power to actually make a decision that you feel good about, and you're staying in ambivalence because it's just more comfortable for some reason, it might be worth looking at what effects is the ambivalence actually having on me, and is it true that it's better for me to stay in this ambivalence? It may or may not be, right? And I think for us to truly get the information that's going to help us create what we actually desire, we have to be willing to look at things in a way that sometimes might be difficult and hard. I'm going to introduce 3 of the questions that she posits in this book that are 3 of my favorite questions from the book that have helped me in my own life. And then I'm going to share one question that I have come up with myself and that I have sometimes used to identify how to navigate my own ambivalence. One of the questions she posits relates to something that was extremely helpful to me during a difficult period of my own life. When I was about 30, I had already been a therapist for a little while, and I was born and raised in the Mormon religion, also called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's mostly what the leaders call it now, so if you're ever wondering, they're the same thing. And I was born in Utah. I was raised in the Mormon church. All of my friends that I was close with were Mormon. All of my family that I was close with was Mormon. All my immediate family was Mormon, my parents, my siblings. I wasn't yet married. I was dating someone for some parts of this process. And for a few years, I began to question my experience with Mormonism in my late 20s, especially after becoming a therapist and working with different issues around mental health, different issues around sexual identities, and really began to notice how some of the things I had learned through the religion were actually a hindrance to my ability to feel like I was looking at the world in the most healthy way. I came to a place where I really wondered, do I stay or do I go? And I don't know if I had this book yet. It was around the time that I purchased the book, but I may have purchased it after I left. I don't remember. So I don't know if this question was what was in my mind when I had this experience, or if I had this experience and then when I read the book, I really resonated with this question because that question had worked for me. I actually don't remember. But the question that she posits is whether if God or some omniscient being said it was okay to leave, would you feel a tremendous relief and have a strong sense that you could finally end your relationship? So if some, quote, higher power, higher being, someone that you perceive as being in more authority over you in your life or knowing what's better for you or having a broader vision, if that person were to say it's okay to leave, would that feel like a tremendous relief and feel like it finally gives you permission to end a relationship that you actually would like to end? If so, this is a good indicator about what you truly desire. So in my own personal experience, one of the biggest moments for me when I was deciding, do I stay in this religion or do I go? I remember going to who I perceived to be God at that time, a higher power than me, something that knew more than I did, could see more than I could, that really knew my heart. And I remember going in a kind of prayer-like state and asking, do I stay or do I go? And the feeling I had, the quote answer I received at that time that seemed to come to me was, it doesn't matter to me, Jenny. You can stay or you can go. Both are completely valid. One is not better than the other. I do not approve of one more than the other. They are both 100% completely valid. And I remember just this feeling of freedom. Like all of a sudden I felt like I could make the decision. It was up to me, and it felt extremely relieving and extremely freeing. And that was a big opening moment for me. That was one of the moments when I knew it was going to be okay, whichever decision I made. I don't remember if that point was prior to the final church meeting I ever attended or if it was after it. The fact that I was struggling with it so much makes me think it was prior to that moment, but it could have been after, in a moment of just fear or worry. Did I make the right decision? I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. But it's a good indicator that ambivalence can happen prior to making a decision, and ambivalence can also happen after we make a decision. Even if it feels clear and right, we can still have moments of doubt, insecurity, wondering whether we did the right thing. That's why I like to remind people that ambivalence is not a problem, it's an experience. And even when you come to a decision, you may still feel ambivalence. And it can take a variety of experiences to feel more and more solid in your decision either way. So I do believe on some level it can be a fantasy to think that we can just make a decision and stay strong and feel a certain way about it forever, because that's just not reality. What I think we can do is we can continue to work to get enough of the right information that's going to help us make decisions, and then we can continue to use those experiences to remind us what our North Star is, what our guiding principle is, and we can also use questions to help us navigate the after experience, because sometimes going through something like this will help remind you what matters. It might also confuse you. There might be times where you read a question that actually adds more confusion and not less confusion. So I don't like to think of these questions as something that will save you from the experience of ambivalence, because at times these types of questions can actually add to the experience of ambivalence. It's really going to depend on your unique situation and where you are. So that question that really works for me, right? Does God or some omniscient being, if he or she were looking down and saying, you know, you can make this decision and that is so valid and it's not going to cause you problems in your life and it's not going to be something that breaks you or keeps you from creating what you want. If that question helps you, great. If that question adds more confusion, then that's just something to pay attention to and stay present with. So when I'm working with my clients, I always at the core come back to what I call the POET process. And the POET process, which I talk about a lot in my own work, is all outlined in my book. So the Mastering Boundaries book, this is kind of like the textbook that I use with my clients. And it's the thing I go back to over and over in my work with clients. So I like this. I think it's really helpful. I think it really especially fits into kind of the friend aspect of how we show up with ourselves as a friend and be willing to get information. And I think it can even help with developing more understanding of what helps us feel aligned and not aligned. And I think, again, we have to pay attention to that as it's happening. And we can use something like the POET process, which I talk about in this book. We're not going to go over that today. The second question she posits that I really like is, as you think about your partner's problem that makes your relationship feel too bad to stay in, does he or she acknowledge it? And are they willing to do something about it? And are they able to change? I love this. So she also talks about another question in this book that relates to what is your bottom line or what are your non-negotiables? And it's really important to be able to answer that, or at least use ambivalence as an opportunity to step into that journey of identifying what are my non-negotiables, what is my bottom line. And I've noticed sometimes for clients it can feel difficult to identify and actually acknowledge the bottom line out loud for two main reasons. Either one, they're afraid that if they acknowledge their non-negotiables or their bottom line, that maybe they'll have to end something that they aren't ready to end or that they don't want to end. The second thing is people sometimes feel ashamed about their bottom line. They feel like their bottom line shouldn't be so low. They feel like they should have higher expectations. For example, some people feel like if my partner cheats on me, I should be willing to leave. Sometimes people don't know until they end up in that experience and suddenly they realize that even though this has happened, it actually doesn't feel like a true bottom line to me. I don't like that it happened. I want to do repair work. I want to figure out how to trust this person again. And maybe the bottom line is, what they're willing to do and what you're willing to do together to repair that betrayal. But some people feel guilty that that's not their bottom line. Or they feel guilty that their bottom line is higher than they think it should be. Like they think that I should be willing to be with someone even if they cheat. I should be willing to at least give them one chance. The truth is, it gets to be up to you what your true bottom line is. And sometimes ambivalence gives you a chance to work and identify what that bottom line actually is. Then the question that I just explained that she asks here is really more about, once you identify that bottom line, or you identify the thing that just makes your relationship feel too bad to stay in, is the person willing and able to acknowledge the thing that doesn't feel good for you, and are they able or willing to change it? So sometimes the non-negotiable doesn't include the opportunity to change it, but sometimes it does. And again, you will have to decide that. I think the reason I really like this question is because that is a question that came up in my own marriage. So in my relationship with my husband, we had both the advantage and disadvantage of me having been trained in relationship work prior to us ever meeting. When I met my husband, I had already been a therapist for a few years, and I already knew a lot about relational work. One thing that didn't work for me was to feel like I was going to carry all the relational knowledge in our marriage. So it became really important to me that I was with someone who was willing to learn, who was willing to go to therapy and coaching with me as a partner so that we could have witnesses look in on our relationship and help and guide us the way I was helping and guiding others. I think being a therapist and being a coach, I could see the benefits of it. And I had therapy and coaching on my own as an individual, but then it became very important to find someone who was willing to also receive that kind of support in a couple experience. And it also became important for me that my partner was going to be willing to become educated relationally. I knew that if they were willing to do that, then I wouldn't feel like I was carrying the relational information or education on my own. We would both have things to bring to the table. And that was a non-negotiable for me. So when I first introduced some of these aspects throughout my relationship with my husband, there were times he felt a little resistant, wasn't quite sure what was going to work for him, wasn't quite sure what he was going to want, maybe just in general didn't want to have any expectations on him about certain things. And he was always willing to come back and to say, I'm willing to do those things that actually are healthy for us. I am willing to get some education. I am willing to go to coaching. I am willing to go to therapy. And so it wasn't always easy to stand up for those desires and really acknowledge that this was a non-negotiable for me. Sometimes that felt so scary to acknowledge. This was probably a situation where I felt like my bottom line was too high. It was too much. My expectations were too high. And when I kept coming back to the truth, I just knew it was the truth for me. It was the truth based on the reality of my experience. And all I could do was work with that truth. And it was amazing to realize I had found a partner who was willing to work on that with me. So identifying your own bottom lines around whatever aspect of the relationship they might be can be a really important part of working through the relationship ambivalence. And the third question she asks that I really like out of this book, again, there's 36, I believe, 32, or no, I'm pretty sure it's 36 questions, but this is another one that she asks that I really like. She says, in spite of all the ways you're different, would you say that deep down, or in some respect that's important to you, your partner is someone just like you in a way you feel good about? So in spite of all the ways you're different, would you say that deep down, or in some respect that's important to you, your partner is someone just like you in a way you feel good about? I really like this question because it reminds me of an experience I have in my relationship with my husband where we are so different. And some of those differences can feel really tough at times. And there's a way that in our relationship, we are so much alike. From my perspective, there is a particular trait that I think we both have that is so similar. And it's such a valuable trait to me that it feels like that becomes a big anchor for me in our relationship. So if you're in a situation where you're feeling ambivalent, this might be a great method to go through. Again, I will put the link for this book in the description below. And I would suggest going and getting the book and going through all of the questions. I want to end by sharing one question that I have come up with in my own journey of sitting with my own experience of ambivalence. And this question is probably the one that I come back to the most in my own experience of navigating ambivalence. And that question is, can I enjoy this journey as much as I want the outcome? So whatever it is I'm wanting to create, whether it's something in my marriage, whether it's something with work, one of the things I was trying to work through at one point was whether or not I wanted to continue the journey of trying to figure out how to have a child. And one of the big questions I would ask is, can I enjoy this journey as much as I want the outcome, or what I imagine the outcome is going to be? This is one thing that really helps me with ambivalence, because I think at the core, ambivalence is really about being able to see the whole thing as one big reality. So yes, the outcome is one aspect of the experience, but the journey is another aspect of the experience. And it's really about not just the outcome that we want to create, but it's really about the journey. And if we can work with both, I think that's one thing that can help to clarify ambivalence. So not only do I want this outcome, but can I enjoy the journey as much as I want the outcome? That doesn't mean there won't be hard things. That doesn't mean it won't be difficult at times, but I think it will mean, does the journey feel as valuable to me as the outcome? And somehow those two, I think they've just got to balance each other out. And I remember at one point prior to meeting my husband, I remember thinking about Thomas Edison and the invention of the light bulb. And I know one of the things that's often taught is that Thomas Edison spent at least 1,000+ tries before the light bulb worked. And I know the reality that there's potentially more people that were involved in the invention of that. And I like to work with this idea that when we're working to create something, it might take many, 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 many iterations to finally create the thing we want. And for me, the question became, okay, I don't know at this point whether or not I will ever find a partner. I didn't meet my husband until I was 35. It was a first marriage for me at 38. I started dating with my first boyfriend at 15. I was always in love with the idea of being in love. I loved the idea of relationships. And yet, by the time I hit age 34, I still didn't have my own long-term relationship that I really felt like I could step 2 feet into with someone who also wanted to step 2 feet in with me. And I remember thinking, I don't know, I might go my whole life and maybe I won't ever find a partner. And that is always a reality. So I came to this question of, okay, well, whether or not I do or don't find a partner, I want to be in this journey. And that felt very clear to me. So that question has been really helpful for me in working with ambivalence. The same thing came up when I was deciding how far down the road to explore different options for bringing a child into the world, or adopting or fostering. Like, how far down any of those roads do I go to create the experience of bringing a child into our home? And it was really a few of the questions that helped me with that experience. And one of the questions was, can I enjoy the journey of this as much as I want the outcome? And for me, the answer came to a place where it started to feel like a no. I don't want this journey anymore in any of these different areas. None of the journeys feel like something I want to do. In that moment, it became very clear to me that it was time to turn my attention, and then it became mine and Bryce's attention, towards something different. In this video, we've talked about what is ambivalence, the different types or categories of ambivalence, a method that you can use to get unstuck through Mira Kirschenbaum's work, and some of my favorite questions, both from her work and my own question, that I have found to be really helpful in navigating ambivalence in my own life. Sending you so much care. Ambivalence is not a problem, it's an experience. Allow yourself to be with it. And again, if you want to learn how to work with ambivalence in healthier and healthier ways, feel free to check out my book, Mastering Boundaries. I'll also put the link for that in the description below. Or come check out the group program that Bryce and I have, where we have 2 coaching calls each month, where you can come and observe other people asking questions. You can watch the recordings. You yourself can get on and ask a question. You can email a question in. So come join us on that group call. I'll put a link in the description below for that group as well. Or if you want private coaching, there's also a link in the description for that. And if you're ready to check out one of my other videos, you can do that here. Just click on the one that looks interesting to you, Make sure you subscribe so you never miss a video, and I'll talk to you soon.